forget to a couple there from Atomic Energy Commission had done the work in getting it put together. Explain what they were using by way of Lord, I've forgotten now.
Were gas, buggy, and Rulison used a single detonation. Project Rio Blanco would use three 33 kiloton nuclear explosives detonated simultaneously at various steps in a single well bore. Colorado's Governor John Love originally expressed some hesitation about nuclear stimulation, stating in January of 1973 that he was considering vetoing the Rio Blanco project.
And there had been a lot of unanticipated effects, even as a result of those smaller explosions. But the AEC, you know, they had X amount of funding for Atoms for Peace,
Project
Plowshare, and they were going to, by God, use their whole budget whether it made sense or not.
There had been announcements about the wagon wheel stimulation project clear back in the late 60s.
El Paso Natural Gas was then Bill Randolph, who was a public relations man, up here to discuss how benign the technology this was, and to discuss how little it would impact the local people. And he was kind of a slick, scientifically oriented gentleman. And the more Phil Randolph talked, the more pissed off the people in Pinedale got. It was have
You didn't have an argument until you went to a meeting in Big Piney.
The cattlemen had a meeting down in Big Piney, and there were in excess of 1,000 people that attended this because they were going to discuss this wagon wheel project.
We were pretty upset because the field, of course, that they really wanted to, the El Paso field that they wanted to try it on was the wagon wheel, of course, which is, you know where it is.
Yeah, it's
just south, it's on the Big Piney cutoff.
El Paso's project Wagon Wheel was located 19 miles south of Pinedale. Development on the field had been attempted and failed several times since the 1930s. But Project Wagon Wheel would have been the first to attempt to free the gas using nuclear stimulation.
El Paso Natural Gas was not an outsider in this way. In 1953 or 4, the Union Pacific Railroad, over which I've had an ambivalence between love and hate all of my life since I was a 2 or 3-year-old kid. When you raise in Rock Springs, that's how it is. The Union Pacific Railroad ceased the burning of coal and its prime movers for the entire system and put in diesel fuel. Lovely new, fancy-looking, not rigged. And that put about 3,500 men out of work in Wyoming. And Rock Springs was a pretty sick town there for about 1 year. And people said, well, when are they going to roll up these sidewalks? Or where do we go from here? And that sort of talk. And up comes a little outfit called El Paso Natural Gas. And the first thing you know, there are 40, 45 people getting jobs driving trucks and going out south, building some wells. Another 40 or 50 people employed out in Northwest. And all of a sudden, by God, we saw something else in Southwest Wyoming was going to keep us alive, not just the damn coal. And El Paso became a welcome citizen and stayed that way a long, long time.
If Wagon Wheel was successful and the Sublette County field could be developed, The potential gas was estimated to be a substantial portion of the U.S. supply and worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wagon wheel was going to be 5 100 kiloton devices, something like that, sequentially fired.
As a scientist, I would have been fascinated to see something like this. You know, you have all the theories, and then you think, aha, now suppose we had, instead of just one detonation going on, we had 5 sequentially, a minute apart or something like that. What would happen then?
So as you got to know more about it, what seemed to you to be the biggest problems with it?
Well, the biggest problem to me was the idea that we might be polluting one of the major aquifers of the West with radioactive isotopes that would be around for about 300,000 years.
Water radiation was something that I've noted here, but in rereading this, that was also left unanswered. And God, that's all we need to do is mess up the headwaters of the Green River and take care of millions and millions of people downstream.
Well, it was a scary thing. If they let that thing go sluiced down in there in the aquifer, we had a problem forever.
As we studied the environmental impact statement, then we were aware of the possible consequences.
The gas, of course, would be radioactive.
And the idea was that when they piped the gas into gas lines, into pipelines, that they would pipe other gas in, and the radioactive elements would be diluted. So hopefully you wouldn't get a dose.
They wanted to flare the gas for a year. And it was going to drop out all that tritium, cesium-137, and so forth and so on the people that live downwind.
If my recollection is correct, they made statements, for example, to the effect that people living downwind should not really use the milk from their cows.
And of course, when a cow grazes on the grass that has had iodine-131 drifting down on it, the cow concentrates that radioactive isotope in the milk. And then when the kid drinks the milk,
And it becomes a cumulative thing, and then either in the beef or in the milk, it can be transferred to humans. And since this is a cattle-raising country, and the people depend on their livelihood from that, it seemed like an awful risk.
It was being pushed by the boys at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. It's where the idea came up. And then El Paso, had all these leases here on the Mesa.
This is what the formation looks like at ground zero under the pressure of some 8,500 feet of Battlement Mesa formations above it. The gray sections are Mesa Verde sandstone, and the black portions are shale, which sandwich the sandstone and thus entrap the natural gas. The conventional way to release such entrapped gas is to break up the formation by shattering it with nitroglycerin or to open fractures with liquid under pressure. The Atomic Energy Commission believes a nuclear explosive will prove far cheaper and a great deal more efficient.
Nuclear stimulation was designed to recover natural gas from tight rock and sandstone formations. Nuclear stimulation was a commercial use of nuclear explosives and a perfect match for the Atomic Energy Commission's Plowshare program.
The argument from El Paso and the AEC was, just let us go ahead with this experiment so we can see if it will work, and then we'll have the technique if we need it in the future.
On the 10th of December, 1967, in northern New Mexico, with relatively little fanfare, El Paso Natural Gas Company and the Atomic Energy Commission detonated the first warhead designed for nuclear stimulation in what they termed Project Gas Buggy. Consisting of a single 29 kiloton nuclear explosive detonated at a depth of 4,200 feet, Gas Buggy was declared a success as it apparently did produce some natural gas from the tight formations in New Mexico. The AEC set its sights north to Project Rulison.
This is how the device is expected to stimulate gas production in the Rulison field. The energy released by the nuclear explosion will melt and vaporize nearby rock and will fracture the rock beyond to a diameter of about 740 feet. A spherical cavity of about 160 feet in diameter will be created in about 1/10 of a second, or in about the time the shock wave rebounds from the surface. As the cavity cools, the vaporized and melted rock will collect in a puddle at the bottom, and most of the radioactivity will be entrapped here as it solidifies. Sometime after the explosion, the roof of the cavity will collapse progressively upward, forming a chimney of broken rock to a height of about 370 feet above the point of detonation. Government experts say the fractures beyond the cavity area are expected to provide flow channels for some of the gas trapped in the surrounding rock. The chimney will act as a chamber where the gas will collect, to be drawn off through a well drilled back into the chimney.
I can't remember what they said about Gas Buggy, but from Rulison they had not used any of the gas that they had produced.
The next nuclear stimulation blast was not conducted until May 17, 1973 in Rio Blanco County, Colorado.
I'm imagining you on that plane now flying over and looking at the test on the western slope.
Yeah.
Well, did you have a pretty open mind at that point about it?
Yes, I think so, because there were spokesmen there from El Paso, one from El Paso Natural Gas. There were a couple there from Atomic Energy Commission that had done the work in getting it put together, explained what they were using by way of load. I've forgotten now.
Where Gas Buggy and Rulison used a single detonation, Project Rio Blanco would use three 33-kiloton nuclear explosives detonated simultaneously at various depths in a single wellbore. Colorado's Governor John Love originally expressed some hesitation about nuclear stimulation, stating in January of 1973 that he was considering vetoing the Rio Blanco project.
And there had been a lot of unanticipated effects. Even as a result of those smaller explosions, but the AEC, you know, they had X amount of funding for Atoms for Peace. Project Plowshare, and they were going to, by God, use their whole budget whether it made sense or not.
There had been announcements about the wagon wheel stimulation project clear back in the late 60s.
El Paso Natural Gas would bring Phil Randolph, who was their public relations man, up here to discuss how benign a technology this was, and to discuss how little it would impact the local people. And he was kind of a slick, scientifically oriented gentleman. And the more Phil Randolph talked, the more pissed off the people in Pinedale got. It was wonderful.
You didn't have an argument till you went to a meeting in Big Piney.
The cattlemen had a meeting down in Big Piney, and there were in excess of 1,000 people that attended this because they were going to discuss this wagon wheel project.
We were pretty upset because the field, of course, that they really wanted to, the El Paso field that they wanted to try it on was the wagon wheel, of course, which is, you know where it is.
Yeah, it's
Just south, it's on the Big Piney cutoff.
El Paso's Project Wagon Wheel was located 19 miles south of Pinedale. Development on the field had been attempted and failed several times since the 1930s. But Project Wagon Wheel would have been the first to attempt to free the gas using nuclear stimulation.
El Paso Natural Gas was not an outsider in this way. In 1953 or 4, the Union Pacific Railroad, over which I've had an ambivalence between love and hate all of my life since I was a 2 or 3-year-old kid. When you're raised in Rock Springs, that's how it is. the Union Pacific Railroad ceased the burning of coal and its prime movers for the entire system and put in diesel fuel. Lovely, new, fancy-looking rigs. And that put about 3,500 men out of work in Wyoming. And Rock Springs was a pretty sick town there for about 1 year. And the people say, well, when are they going to roll up these sidewalks? Or where do we go from here? And that sort of talk. And up comes a little outfit called El Paso Natural Gas, and the first thing you know, there are 40, 45 people getting jobs driving trucks, and going out south, building some wells, another 40 or 50 people employed out in Northwest. And all of a sudden, by God, we saw something else in Southwest Wyoming was going to keep us alive, not just the damn coal. And El Paso became a welcome citizen and stayed that way a long, long time.
If Wagon Wheel was successful and the Sublette County field could be developed, the potential gas was estimated to be a substantial portion of the U.S. supply and worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wagon Wheel was going to be 5 100 kiloton devices, something like that, sequentially fired.
As a scientist, I would have been fascinated to see something like this. You know, you have all the theories, and then you think, aha, now suppose we had, instead of just one detonation going on, we had 5 sequential, a minute apart or something like that. What would happen then?
So as you got to know more about it, what seemed to you to be the biggest problems with it?
Well, the biggest problem to me was the idea that we might be polluting one of the major aquifers of the West with radioactive isotopes that would be around for about 300,000 years.
Water radiation was something that I've noted here in rereading this that was also left unanswered. And God, that's all we need to do is mess up the headwaters of the Green River and take care of millions and millions of people downstream.
Well, it was a scary thing. If they let that thing go sluiced down in there in the aquifer, we had a problem forever.
As we studied the environmental impact statement, then we were aware of the possible consequences.
The gas, of course, would be radioactive.
And the idea was that when they piped the gas into gas lines, into pipelines, that they would pipe other gas in, and the radioactive elements would be diluted. So hopefully you wouldn't get a dose.
They wanted to flare the gas for a year. And it was going to drop out all the tritium, cesium-137, and so forth and so on the people that lived downwind.
If my recollection is correct, they made statements, for example, to the effect that people living downwind should not really use the milk from their cows.
And of course, when a cow grazes on the grass that has had iodine-131 drifting down on it, the cow concentrates that radioactive isotope in the milk. And then when the kid drinks the milk,
And it becomes a cumulative thing, and then either in the beef or in the milk, it can be transferred to humans. And since this is a cattle-raising country, and the people depend on their livelihood from that, it seemed like an awful risk.
Was being pushed by the boys at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory is where the idea came up. And then El Paso, had all these leases here on the mesa.
This is what the formation looks like at ground zero under the pressure of some 8,500 feet of battlement mesa formations above it. The gray sections are Mesa Verde sandstone, and the black portions are shale, which sandwich the sandstone and thus entrap the natural gas. The conventional way to release such entrapped gas is to break up the formation by shattering it with nitroglycerin or to open fractures with liquid under pressure. the Atomic Energy Commission believes a nuclear explosive will prove far cheaper and a great deal more efficient.
Nuclear stimulation was designed.
We were on our way again on the Broadway's overnight journey to Chicago.
To regulate and control.
As humans, we're well aware we need water to live. Fortunately for us, we live on a water planet. But that doesn't mean we have an entire globe of H2O to use as we please. So just how does the usable water break down for us? A giant 97% of Earth's water is in the ocean, so we can't use that. 3% is fresh water, but even in that small sliver, about 2% is locked in glaciers, ice caps, and groundwater. That leaves about 1% of the fresh water on Earth that is accessible and usable by humans. Let's imagine all of that accessible fresh water fits into this tiny pool. Now we'll get to some small numbers when we look at global fresh water. There really is a small fraction of usable and accessible freshwater on this water planet, so how do we use that tiny pool? In the United States, about 49% is used in thermal electric power production, while agricultural irrigation makes up about 31%. 11% goes to public use in our cities and towns, 4% goes into industry and manufacturing, and 1% is domestic use. The water coming out of our faucets largely comes from precipitation. Measuring how much or how little precipitation falls can impact how we live our daily lives. Elsewhere around the globe, in developing countries, agricultural irrigation accounts for about 70% of freshwater use, while industrial use is 20% and 10% for public consumption. In places where access to usable freshwater is greatly limited, knowing when and where precipitation may fall is critical to livelihoods.
Channel 13, KTRK TV, Houston. We care about Texas. Live with the entire Eyewitness News team. This is Channel 13 Eyewitness News.
It was once paradise to Brownwood residents. That was back before Hurricanes Carla and Alicia. And today that Baytown Peninsula is paradise to migrating birds who are heading to South America from Canada. Elma Barrera is standing by live right now at what is now the Baytown Nature Center with more. Elma?
Exactly. Remember the Brownwood subdivision? Well, this is it. I'm standing right on it. This area used to be covered with homes. Just to give you an idea of where we are, there's Baytown in the background with the smokestacks. And to the west of us, the San Jacinto Monument. So this is now a nature center, a wetlands area that helps birds with their migrations. Remember Brownwood in 1983 after Hurricane Alicia? Houses destroyed, rising water, and subsidence. After a long and bitter battle, the city of Baytown bought them out and residents moved on. The land sat, and from that emerged a life-saving master plan.
Mother Nature has been very quick to reclaim this land, and I think that's probably what has inspired a lot of us to work towards it becoming a nature center.
From there, the dream took flight. In the last 10 years, Baytown has developed the wetlands to continue what Mother Nature started.
People don't realize, I don't think, how just how many species of birds we can see here and have here, and that need our habitats in order to survive, because they have to come after those long flights. They lose a lot of energy, a lot of fat stores, and then they feed in these areas.
After resting, the birds gather enough strength to fly across the Gulf of Mexico to Central and South America to the rainforests. It is also a dream come true for bird watchers.
We can see more species of birds here in a year than any place else in North America.
That's the Upper Coast, 6 counties included. Here in the Nature Center, 6 different kinds of birds on the endangered species list have been spotted. And this is only the beginning.
This is brand new. That's just a nursery grasslands right there. And like I said, in just a matter of a few years, it'll be a full marsh.
And the Nature Center is also used for breeding crabs, shrimp, and the like. And like you can see, it's also used for fishing by the public. Reporting live, I'm Elma Barrera, 13 Eyewitness News.
From KHOU-TV Houston in the spirit of Texas, this is 11 News at 5.
As folks in North Carolina begin the cleanup from Hurricane Bonnie, people here are still remembering Hurricane Alicia 15 years ago. Charles Hadlock tells us about a Baytown neighborhood that disappeared after Alicia, but is now taking on a new and very different life.
The Brownwood subdivision was swamped by a 10-foot storm surge from Hurricane Alicia. 300 homes were destroyed on this low-lying peninsula. Residents had been flooded out so many times before that after Alicia, Brownwood was ordered abandoned.
And now, 15 years later, some of the houses are still standing, just barely. And the Brownwood subdivision is home to a new breed of residents.
They need a place, and this is the place for them.
Baytown decided to turn the old neighborhood into a wildlife sanctuary. Bayshore and Ridgeway and MacArthur Streets, prominent in the old neighborhood, belong to the herons and the egrets now.
This is probably going to turn out to be the most unique resource of this type that Baytown has ever had and probably will ever have.
400 acres in the shadow of the San Jacinto Monument have been transformed into the Baytown Nature Center. And nature has taken over. A few of the wrecked houses will be left standing, a reminder of how powerful nature can be.
We have a healthy respect for the storm surges and all that comes through with hurricanes.
The hurricane wiped Brownwood off the map. The people have moved on, and the birds and wildlife are now at home. Charles Hadlock, 11 News, Baytown.
And in fact, Baytown is considering several grants to make the Nature Center a place where people and nature can come together in an otherwise urban environment.
Well, let's start with water in the wild, so to speak, and in large quantities, because in our modern scheme of civilization, we do use water in large quantities. You know, water is essential to life. Without water, there is no animal or vegetable life. Here's a desert scene. There's no water there, and you often find the skeletons of animals there that died for lack of water. Water comes to us in the form of rain, of course. All the water that we get on Earth comes out of the skies, falls on the forests and on the fields, and then drains into the little brooks, and the little brooks into the larger brooks and the streams, and finally the rivers and lakes, and into the ocean. And in the meanwhile, it is being drawn up again by the sun, and the cycle is repeated. From the beginning of history, we know that man has enjoyed water and used water in many ways. For instance, water power is an old trick. Here's a crude water wheel producing power and saving hand labor. And of course, women haven't been behind men either. They know that water has some good qualities. But this water that we get that way, that scours the earth and the city streets and is full of garbage and sewage and waste products and dirt of all kinds. And to use it, we have to screen out the impurities. And we screen it roughly with large grills of this kind in the first place, and then through successively smaller grills. And finally, we put up a dam and create an artificial lake called a reservoir, where the water is still and where the impurities sink to the bottom. Now, it's in these reservoirs that our little friends go to work for us, the minute one-cell bacteria that I mentioned before. They destroy the organic life that is in the water. They absolutely eat it up or break it down, whichever way you want to put it. And this then sinks to the bottom of this reservoir, where it becomes a sediment or a sludge, and we have good uses for that sediment or sludge. One thing that we can do with it is simply to pour it out where we want the ground to be raised. We can use it to make ground, as we do with dredges in many places. Another thing is that in the process of purifying water, these bacteria help to produce a gas, and we can burn this gas. As a matter of fact, this gas is used to produce the power in some of these purifying stations, which I consider a neat trick. And of course, the third thing that we can do with this sediment or sludge is to use it as a fertilizer in our fields, because it contains a great many valuable chemical elements that help to produce better crops. You know, the shepherds shear their sheep every year. Well, the wool is pretty dirty. The sheep are out in the fields, you know, and lie down in the dirt. It takes a tremendous amount of water to wash the dirt out of this wool. And that's a great industry, requiring an enormous amount of water. It has to be washed not once, but many times. Another thing that we recover in the washing of this wool is animal fat. And this animal fat, these oils, are used to make byproducts. One of them, believe it or not, is a face cream that you will find in my lady's boudoir. And another thing that we can make from these oils and fats that we recover in this way is the raw material to which we can add the phenols for the purpose of making plastics. Now, this is sediment that we recovered in that fashion, and it's mixed with one of the phenols, and this is a plastic plant. Mold and impressed, and presto. Out comes a housing of any design that we have in the mold. We can make dishes, we can make housings for cameras. make anything of that kind. Now, it may seem a simple thing to back up water with a dam and hold it under control, but there's more to it than just building a dam across a river or a stream and getting a large, still body of water. Because we do many things with that water, and we have to keep it under control in many ways. So we have funnels and flumes and valves and screens and different ways of handling it for various purposes. One thing that we do with these great dams is to produce electric power in great quantities. The water is run so that it goes through a turbine, a great turbine, which it turns at terrific speed, and this turbine produces the electric power that we use in such great quantities in this country. I'm sure you've seen these power lines going all across the country by hill and dale. We do a great deal of mining in this country. As a matter of fact, they do it in all countries. And we create great caverns, great long hollow galleries under the surface of the earth. Well, sometimes if nothing is done about it, these galleries collapse down there, in which case, of course, the level of the ground above is lowered. And where that happens, water rushes in where there was no water before. Well, now we know that water under control is a powerful agency for good, but water out of control is a powerful agency for destruction. That's been proved many times over in many lands. And it's the reason why in this country we've spent billions of dollars for flood control in order to save life and property damage. Another thing, when we build a great dam for irrigation or for water supply purposes, we have to put in a lot of machinery to put this water where we want it at the right time. And that's why we have powerful pumps and great gates and huge valves. And of course, we have to bring it from the reservoir to where we want it, sometimes as much as 100 miles to a great city at a distance, and then deliver it to the individual houses, so that when you want the water, all you do is reach out and turn on a tap, like this. And we use water in endless ways in all our industry and our commerce. Let's step into a steel factory for a minute. We know that we use water there to produce steam, but we also use it in vast quantities for cooling purposes. In fact, there isn't an art or a science or an industry that doesn't use water, and a great deal of it in many ways in producing whatever type of good that industry or art turns out. And then, of course, we come to the personal use, such as when we water our flowers or take a shower, or go swimming, or go sailing, or any of another dozen ways in which we use it. And while we are using and enjoying it, let's remember this about water. It's essential to life. It's abundant in nature, but let's keep in mind the time, the money, and the labor that's spent to produce our great water supply systems.
We all know the Earth is full of water, but there's a lot more to water than all that blue stuff you see on the globe. The water we can see on the surface of the Earth is surface water. Surface water is every lake, pond, river, stream, and ocean on Earth. But in the ground below your feet, there's even more water, groundwater. Groundwater is water that's crammed in the tiny gaps between rocks, soils, and sediments under the ground. A full body of groundwater is called an aquifer. There are huge aquifers all across America. The biggest is the High Plains Aquifer, which covers 174,000 square miles right in the middle of the country. Anything that big deserves a closer look. Let's say you could grab a shovel and dig straight down through the soils to an aquifer. The level underground where you first hit groundwater is called the water table. Below the water table, the ground is completely soaked or saturated with water, which is why this area is called the saturated zone. The area above the water table is called the unsaturated zone. So, how does all this water end up in the ground? Well, it's all a part of the good old water cycle. When it rains, some water gets soaked up by plants. Some water runs off the soil and into streams, lakes, or even the ocean. Other water gets stuck on the surface and eventually evaporates back into the air. Meanwhile, some of the lucky water droplets get to travel down through the surface deep underground until they reach the water table and become a part of an aquifer. Once water seeps down deep enough into the ground, it can stay there for a really long time. Some of the water stored in the deepest parts of aquifers has been there for thousands of years. But after it gets there, groundwater doesn't always stay in the ground. A lot of the water on the surface comes from aquifers. If the surface of the ground dips below the water table, groundwater flows out into the space, creating a body of surface water. If the surface water dries up, groundwater can flow in to fill it back up. And if the water table in this area rises, so does the level of the surface water. Groundwater can also pour down a sloping surface, creating streams. Any place where groundwater flows out into the surface is called a spring. Surface water can also become groundwater. If a body of surface water flows above the water table, water can seep down through the sediment and help fill the aquifer. Of course, there's another way that groundwater can leave the ground: us. Humans depend on groundwater, and there are thousands of wells all over the country that draw water out of aquifers. In many parts of the country, the water you get from the tap comes from the ground. However, we use most of our groundwater to help grow the food we eat. Farms can get lots of the water they need from rain, but rain isn't always enough. And in dry years, farmers depend even more on the water that's stored in the ground. In fact, American farms use about 53 billion gallons of groundwater every day. That's enough to fill over 1 million bathtubs or 80,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So, if we're using that much every day, can it run out? Well, yes and no. Remember, aquifers can be refilled by rainwater or surface water seeping in from rivers and streams, so there's usually more water on its way to replenish the aquifer. But if we use groundwater faster than the aquifers can refill, we could drain them dry. They probably wouldn't be empty forever, but it would take hundreds of years for the largest aquifers to get back to healthy levels. Whether it's up here or down there, water and how we use it matters. We may not be able to see it every day, but groundwater makes our lives possible. So don't let show-offs like rushing rivers and roaring oceans get all the attention. Those unseen aquifers below ground have been here longer than we have, and with a little love and care, they'll keep on taking care of us long into the future.
excrete the waste products of metabolism. Cells would die if some of these waste products were allowed to accumulate. Various means of excreting waste products have evolved. In unicellular organisms, such as paramecium, the excess carbon dioxide and ammonia diffuse out of the cell. Ammonia is highly toxic, but animals living in water can flush out and dilute the ammonia easily and quickly. Excess water, which accumulates in the paramecium, passes from the cytoplasm into a contractile vacuole by way of radiating canals. When the vacuole is filled, it expels the water to the outside. Energy is expended in the process. In some multicellular animals, carbon dioxide and ammonia diffuse out of the cells. This is possible because their cells are in constant contact with the external medium. Planarians also are surrounded by water and excrete carbon dioxide and ammonia by diffusion. However, a planarian does have an excretory system which consists of a series of branching tubes. The outer ends of these branching tubes open to the outside. The inner ends terminate in flame cells. Each flame cell contains a space which connects with an excretory duct. A tuft of cilia projects into the space, and the beating of the cilia creates a current which forces water through the branching tubes to the outside. The beating of cilia in flame cells can also be seen in a rotifer. Flame cells remove water from spaces around the cells. In the earthworm, the circulatory system is the chief route for the removal of carbon dioxide. Blood circulating in capillaries close to the exterior of the skin receives oxygen and gives up carbon dioxide. The earthworm also has excretory tubes, which can be seen when the overlying organs are removed. There are 2 excretory tubes, or nephridia, for nearly every segment of the body. The funnel, or inner end of each tube, is in the body cavity. The body cavity contains coelomic fluid into which metabolic wastes diffuse from the cells. Moving cilia, which encircle each funnel, propel some of the waste products into the excretory tubes. Capillaries form a network around the tubes, which pick up some waste materials directly from the blood. Cilia in the tubes beat and the muscular walls contract, forcing the fluid waste through openings or nephridiopores to the outside of the body. Ammonia and urea are the chief nitrogenous wastes that are excreted through the nephridia pore. Annelids have two nephridia for nearly every segment. The excretory organs of insects are localized in one area. One end of the excretory organs, or Malpighian tubules, floats freely in the large cavities, where the blood brings metabolic wastes, except carbon dioxide, from all cells. The other end opens into the digestive canal. The tubules extract wastes from the blood and pass them into the digestive canal. Uric acid, which needs very little water to carry it away, has evolved as the major nitrogenous waste product of insects. The uric acid in crystalline form passes out with the undigested food particles. The grasshopper removes carbon dioxide, one of the major metabolic wastes, by the tracheal tubes which branch repeatedly to reach all parts of the body. The excretory system of a crayfish, a crustacean, consists chiefly of two large green glands, which remove nitrogenous wastes from the blood. These wastes pass through ducts and are discharged through two excretory pores. The principal excretory organs in all vertebrates are two kidneys, which in the frog lie on either side of the spine. The bladder temporarily stores some of the urine. In amphibians, urine flows from the kidneys through the ureters to the cloaca. Some of the urine may be forced into the bladder where it is stored until eliminated. Mammals also have two kidneys, one on each side of the spine. In most mammals, the ureters connect directly to a bladder. A single duct, the urethra, connects to the bladder and discharges to the exterior. The two kidneys of mammals remove wastes from the bloodstream and excrete them as liquid urine. Blood with wastes is brought to each kidney in the renal artery and leaves through the renal vein. The urine leaves the kidney through the ureter. About 1/4 of the blood flowing in the dorsal aorta enters the two kidneys. The blood leaves the kidneys through the renal veins, which empty into the inferior vena cava. After the renal artery enters the kidney, it breaks into many smaller branches, which run through the inner portion of the kidney into the outer layer, or cortex. The cortex contains about 1 million microscopic tubes, the nephrons. The nephrons, which remove urea, salts, and other waste materials from the blood, play a major role in maintaining the composition of body fluids. At one end, the wall of the tubule is expanded and folded into a chamber, Bowman's capsule. The other end opens into a duct or tubule that collects urine. A capillary network is in close proximity with each nephron. Within the Bowman's capsule is a tuft of capillaries, the glomerulus. The close contact between the blood vessels and the nephron permits rapid exchange of materials. The blood flowing through the glomerulus is under pressure from the pumping of the heart. This pressure causes water and dissolved materials to filter into the capsules. The water and dissolved materials move through the tubule. Useful materials, such as glucose, are reabsorbed from the tubule into the capillary network. Glucose and other materials are reabsorbed against the diffusion gradient. They move from an area of low concentration to one of high concentration. This is active transport and requires a great expenditure of energy. Some materials are secreted from the blood into the tubule. This movement also involves active transport. Active transport can be demonstrated with living tubules of a goldfish in a solution containing the dye phenol red. The dye moves into the lumen of the tubule, even though the concentration of dye in the lumen is much greater than in the surrounding solution. Urea and other waste materials in the tubules move to collecting ducts. These discharge into a central cavity that connects with the ureter. The urine passes through the ureter to the bladder, where it is stored. Eventually, the urine is expelled to the outside through the urethra. Thus, living organisms have various ways of excreting metabolic waste products. Unicellular organisms excrete toxic ammonia and other waste directly into the external environment. Most multicellular organisms have excretory systems which transfer uric acid, urea, and other wastes to the exterior.
illnesses.
It's a study where they noticed that their laboratory animals were not reproducing properly, and they tested the water and they found that a number of these types of chemicals were shown to inhibit the reproductive cycles, to show embryonic growth retardation.
One time I saw Mom and Dad really upset. Mom was crying, and I started to cry, and I got really upset, and I got so mad I started to run down the road, and I was going to go tell Mr. Jones off. I didn't know what else I could do. I was so mad. Getting out of the shower with my skin all dried out, getting rashes, and the water smelled terrible, you know. I'm just worried that, you know, maybe a couple years from now, maybe something might happen to me from all the stuff, the chemicals. I don't know.
I could have phoned them informally and said what we had found, but it was not my business to officially inform these people that this is what we had found in their well, be it bad or good. I'm not saying it wasn't done, I'm just saying it wasn't my official capacity. I had enough to do investigating the geology.
The whole area knew just what was going on.
I think the inspectors have gone personally to each one of these people in the area and advising him that maybe some contamination in there, and we will be doing further testing on it, requesting the DEP to do further testing on it, and we will let them know the results as they say.
To date, even now, as far as I know, none of these people have been officially notified that their wells are dangerously contaminated.
No, nobody has ever told us not to drink the water. We're just not going to drink the water.
I just think it's a crime that no one warned anybody about it. I mean, after all, what if I had kids, you know?
The only solution would be to move out from here. To move out is not so easy either. So I have to stay over here and operate in a very different way.
Legally, morally, ethically. Once I knew the water was bad, I couldn't sell this. The only thing I could have done with it was abandon it. I couldn't afford to do that. And some people, they're not monsters. They're just average neighbors and friends. And they say, why don't you dump it? Why don't you dump it? Now, how in the hell can any person do this to somebody else? I couldn't.
When Teddy was negotiating to buy this property, Teddy questioned the hole over there, and they told him that, Teddy, don't worry about it, because that hole is supposed to be filled up. But as time went on, he was only digging further and further and further.
We wrote a petition and circulated it and presented it to the township committee. And one of the major items in that petition was that the area be tested in ever-widening circles to determine exactly how far the pollution existed. And a week later, I got a summons from my township for failing to abate the nuisance of having a bad well.
We said this is a nuisance, and according to the public health nuisance code, this is considered a nuisance, and also it does not meet the provisions of the housing code, therefore he should not be using the well, and the house is not habitable.
We got the phone call that we would have to leave the house.
There's no way they would get me to move out of the house. Created so much publicity, raising bloody hell about it, until the township was forced into supplying municipal water here. Oh, yeah, you got to keep the brick clean, sir.
You're going to use scaffolding?
Ladders? No, we use ladders. Throughout this situation, I've run into attitudes from people. What does he know? He's only a painter. And, of course, I resent this a little bit. I paid a very high tuition to learn what I know of polluting chemicals.
After having gone through 2 years or so of trying to get the township to run water, the municipal water became contaminated from a different source.
If my well becomes contaminated, and then the municipal supply that replaces my own well becomes contaminated, there's a serious problem. Well, this department's plan is to deal with these situations as we find out about them and try to remedy them as best we can and minimize the damage.
What about preventing them from happening?
Now, in my case, I don't feel that city water, especially South Brunswick's municipal water, is better than what I had before my well became polluted. But the township feels that I derive benefit from having a water line installed, so they assessed me. Now, that's bad enough. When you come to Teddy, what benefit does he derive from having a municipal water line run past his lawn frontage? He can't use the water for irrigation.
It's too expensive.
It's got chlorine in it, and it's too expensive.
Chlorinated too, and restricted. When mostly I would need it when it's dry spell. You are not allowed to use it. Because it's dry spell, plants are dying. Now we give the water with poison, the plants will die anyhow. So it's a good question. Water, not water. Business is going down completely to zero. We are almost finished, or we have to depend only on the rain, which is very hard, you know that. %90 is dead. All enterprise for nothing, garbage, and maybe 1 in 100 or something will be good. So naturally, still I save it. But that's not the way to make production. You know what that's mean by it? That's not the way to exist. Oh yeah, oh work, and greenhouse space, energy to heat it, everything for nothing. So naturally, we have to use our brain and what to do. There will be no help from government, from nobody. We will start to grow potatoes or anything what will grow with polluted water.
Teddy Cordes and I hired a lawyer and joined suit with the state against the JIS landfill and the companies that dumped there. Hiring that lawyer was probably our first really big mistake.
The damages were no longer that terrible, for one thing. The damages to their life had been completely eliminated, except as it existed in the past. Because they now had public water. The damage to the well was no longer an issue because they didn't need the well. They had public water.
What about Eddie's nursery?
Well, but apparently he didn't care to continue on in the business.
I don't think that's true.
Well, that was his version of it.
Mr. Mezzi was beginning to talk in a way that upset me very much. He wanted us to settle. He kept suggesting that we settle. Don't carry it through the court. But as time went on, I got the feeling more and more that Fred was not interested in winning a case for us. He was interested in getting out of the case and getting us out.
What do you think, Daddy?
No, absolutely not.
So we verbally agreed to settle for $10,000, but only after offering to settle. Teddy says $5. I seem to remember $1. To settle for $1 if the court would close the landfill. And the court refused to close the landfill. They admitted that the landfill did damage the aquifer. It did poison my well. It must have poisoned my children. But maybe 1,000 years from now, it'll drift away a little bit, so no harm was done and we collected nothing. We dreamed that there was justice in American courts, and we got wiped out. You talk about David and Goliath. We were so naive to fight Shell Chemical, Ortho-Pharmaceutical, Textron Incorporated, General Motors, General Electric, BASF Wyandotte, Phelps Dodge, and that's a partial list of the people we filed suit against.
The state did not press charges against those industries.
But why not?
It's never been our policy to sue companies that generate waste when they take it to a landfill that's registered for that waste, as long as the landfill itself is functioning.
The state allowed companies to bring the waste there.
I'm not saying the state's at fault. I don't think there is fault, no.
JIS landfill is still operating. The Department of Environmental Protection is still ostensibly at least trying to close it down. The materials that have been deposited in that landfill are still leaching into the groundwaters, and they will be leaching for many years. So I have very little confidence in the state's ability to regulate or enforce its own regulations. Now, if the state doesn't cite, and I certainly wouldn't trust industry to cite all by itself, I frankly don't know where we're going to go from there in citing.
We are not going to cite any sites. We are laying out the strategy or recommendations for the governor and the department for a process to evaluate sites.
I come here tonight rather, some people say pessimistically. I've begun to feel that I come here with the realistic thought that these meetings don't really seem to produce any results. If we can make it more expensive to pollute than not to pollute, then industry, which is very well represented here tonight, I count 6 against, 3 or 4 at the conference table, will, as a matter of simple self-defense, have to figure its own way out of the dilemma which it has created.
We're for and have spent money and have led the way on a lot of environmental fights. The chemical industry does not object to spending money for sound environmental control. We are objecting to sending good money after bad because we have much better ways to use it.
This is obviously a continuing dialogue. Therefore, I want to tell you that I hope that this is not our last meeting together. I have a telephone number and I would like for you to write it down if you would. It's 609-292-2885.
No one gets nailed down, and I still say, and I'm going to say this probably to my dying day, we've got to make it more expensive to pollute than not to pollute. And unless we do that, pollution will continue. Absolutely.
Meanwhile, you have my phone number.
You're right, I wrote it down.
Okay, good. Thank you again.
When I suspected possible radioactive contamination, I called the state and had to push to get them to take samples. After trying to get written results of radioactive testing done in our area, wasting weeks, I remembered that the state's environmental commissioner, Jerry English, had told me in the spring, call me anytime. I called her office several times, but never managed to reach her. On August 6th of 1980, I went down to Trenton to try to get the written results of the testing. Good morning. I'd like to see Jerry English, please. Mr. Kaler.
Okay, I'll just have a seat and it's here.
I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. English isn't in the office today. Is there something I can do to help you? My name is Barbara Ackerman. I'm her executive assistant.
Well, perhaps there is. We came down because we had been promised...
Who is we, sir?
Well, I'm Frank Kaler from South Brunswick, and I'm spokesman for a group of people in South Brunswick and Monroe. Recently, there's been some radioactive testing done on my well and other wells in the area, and we've been promised that we would be supplied with copies of the laboratory analysis sheets and any reports. We've received nothing, so we thought we'd
First of all, I'm very sorry. If you want to come in and see Mrs. English, what I would suggest, and I would suggest that you always do this if you're coming down to any governmental agency or anywhere, that you call and set up an appointment, because what we try to do is be very responsive.
I understand.
And what,
that.
you know, I'm not used to
I
someone
met-
coming
I
in to
met-
see the boss and having, you know,
I met
do I
Jerry
stand
English.
and wave and say hello to folks?
I met Jerry English
Silly.
last spring at,
Please turn that off.
at Governor Burns' Toxic Task Force meeting, and she told me
Excuse me,
personally-
would you like to come with me, sir? Excuse me, we'll be right with you.
And I was then dragged behind closed doors and told that one must make an appointment, that this was not the way things were done, that one must not arrive unannounced. I told the woman that I had called several times with no results.
All right, action. We'll put the thing on. Action. Want to shake hands?
Okay, glad to
We'll be
meet
right
you.
with you,
That's right.
okay? Have fun. Why don't you sit down and read our magazine?
I was herded into still another room. A man who said he was an atomic scientist attempted to convince me that the amounts of radioactivity found in my well and in my neighbor's wells was not harmful. I showed him the federal standards and asked him why, if the federal people say the water was dangerous, the state still maintained that it was not harmful. He said that the federal standards were very conservative, implying that the federal people were inaccurate and the state knew better. Children are, without doubt, drinking radioactive water at this time, and the state says we wash our hands of it. I'm concerned because the people across the road in Monroe Township are still not hooked up to municipal water.
Anybody else want tea? Hot tea here for you.
Unfortunately, one half of the street is located, the residents are located in South Brunswick, and the other half of the residents across the street are located in Monroe Township. South Brunswick did offer the lineup with respect to Monroe Township picking up part of the bill for the installation of the water line. And I don't think an agreement was reached to have Monroe hook up to the municipal water supply.
Money aside, what about the health of these families? We've been carting water for 6 years now. Looks like we're gonna have a long wait today. Hello. Fine. Everybody's decided to get water at the same time. Hi, Rita. Oh, hi, Eleanor. How are you? Fine. You're here again. Yeah, we meet at the old water hole. Okay, we're almost done here. Yeah. And then we'll be leaving.
have to wait for these people to get through.
Yeah.
Carton water.
Yeah, I'm sick of this.
Prior to this happening, I think the DEP almost worked on a crisis intervention type of program. Now they're on a continual monitoring program. I believe the time span is a sample every 6 months.
I have not seen anybody for 1.5 years to 2 years. Now, it seems to me somewhere along the line, I should have had seen somebody at least once if they came every 6 months. Frank Taylor, who went after it, got a hand to that man.
Every time they got knocked down one way or another, he went right back in and they started fighting again.
An area now where all these homes and all these businesses in this area are supplied by well water. Right now we're in Monroe Township heading down toward Jamesburg. The groundwater flows in a direction from my house directly toward Jamesburg. And the pollution is beginning to show up in wells all the way down the line. They're not doing anything to find out when this will hit Jamesburg, when it's going to start affecting hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Incidentally, here's Ayavadia's nursery with the 2 wells that were bad enough to report.
We had a little trouble with the well over here, the spring.
he was get a lot of sand. It's some chemical, something, eat them up. Well, when it get bad, then we got to do something. We can't stay like this. We got to drink the water. Huh?
If the Diaz wells came up bad, that means necessarily that the private wells in the area have to be contaminated too.
Sure, for our health and for our own child. 4 years old. He'll be around a lot longer than we will be.
The lethargic, just sick feeling. You get that a lot. We've talked about that quite a bit. Some of the homeowners meetings, people think, question, could it be something in the water?
The last time they came down, they did find metals. I think they found lead and zinc in our water. But it was levels that were small enough that they considered at that time that was acceptable to drink.
Yeah, it has chemicals in it. Daddy, from John's house. We have to drink cream soda.
We just hope it doesn't seep up this way. As far as we know, it hasn't yet.
We've been here for 20 years.
I'll take it. It makes wonderful tea. If you have water that makes good tea, you've got good water, and our water makes good tea.
People say, well, my water doesn't smell bad, it tastes good to me. And I have to keep reminding these people that Teddy Cordes water, which was proved to have chloroform, trichloroethane, trichloroethylene, had no discernible odor whatsoever, not to me or to anyone else.
And I haven't had any problem. Well, I can't really, make any waves because it's not affected me, see? But if it ever does, then I'm gonna have to really do something, especially here. That'll blow this whole business.
All I know is what I hear. And Mr. Lewis, his wells are good.
They don't want to face it. Why? I have no idea.
I can't believe that they realize what they're doing and could still do it. They're unthinkingly sacrificing the safety of their family, their children, to protect the value, this mythical thing, of a piece of real estate. We went to all these people and we said, look, we've got a big problem here. They were not interested. Their child perhaps dying from leukemia 15 or 20 years from now, that doesn't count. It's not immediate enough.
If it was a hands-down approach saying, boy, there's no question that these compounds have health significance, then I'd be the first to say, regardless of the cost, we've got to do it. But as soon as you say, well, there's a chance that these could be involved in cancer or whatever other health implication, then you have to look at the economic impact of it. And that's where we are today, the water industry, EPA, and all the health authorities.
No, there is no basis for, quote, warning our population, hey, excuse me, the sky is falling, because it's just plain not true. We do not have, in general, across the board, a problem with our groundwater.
Oh, you'd be amazed when people from all over comes here.
And the water stinks, huh?
Stinky.
That bad?
Horrible.
It smells like polluted water. It tastes like polluted water.
So many different chemicals in the water.
Some of the people that live in our hole have bad water.
We've had rashes in the house. Our scalp has burnt when using the water.
We cannot take baths. We have to take fast showers. And that's taking a chance, too, because the skin absorbs all this.
So at least I can get good water here.
If a contaminating factory don't want to dispose proper way of a poisonous chemical, lets them dump in the president of corporation house, in his backyard. This is what they do to me. Then I would understand that's democracy in a American way. In his backyard. Why in my backyard? Because it's my backyard.
But they're telling you, don't dump in my backyard. Go somewhere else, okay? And it is hard, extremely hard, to work reasonably with any community in this state at this time when you are coming to the point of resolving a disposal problem.
In Elizabeth, they have a facility that stored thousands upon thousands of barrels of hazardous waste. I heard they were having a public meeting, so I decided to go up. I thought maybe I could tell them some of the problems to run into and maybe suggest ways that they can head some of those problems off.
I'm shaking. I'm very scared. I have to breathe this air every day. I don't know what's going to happen to me at the end of the year from breathing this air. I'd like to know.
I just want to know what your office is doing now.
In what regard, sir? I told you that I would monitor that for air pollution violations. Okay, pick on me. If you feel better doing that,
you got the
fine.
job.
No, sir, I did not.
You got the job. You do your job. There's always
do your job.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely
and we
right.
wouldn't have to stand here.
How can you sit there and say that there's no health hazard? The radiation alone causes leukemia, causes cancer. Go to Dr. Wooster's office and ask him about the rate of an increase in leukemia from exposure to radiation. And then don't you sit there, don't you dare sit there and tell me that we don't have to worry about anything to get the cancer out of here. I want to know, am I crazy?
The power is not with DEP, EPA, it's with us. It's with all of us. We are what's going to make or break the future of this country. We will determine it. I would suggest to each one of you, as you read the newspapers and you see a comment, and you see a name, and you don't like what that man said in the newspaper, you call DEP, you call EPA. Don't buckle under.
It was a toxic time bomb. Last night it went off, exploding into a gigantic fireball, lighting up the sky along the major highways and waterways of New Jersey and Staten Island. The site in Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Immediately I thought of it must have been the spot that Frank had visited last year. It was unbelievable, I mean, what was happening.
But the cleanup process was moving along at a snail's pace while the time bomb kept ticking.
Because the state's been dragging its feet. You know that. Everybody knows it.
Governor Byrne arrived after much of the danger was past. He told reporters the state had to move slowly in cleaning up the site because each of the 40,000 barrels has to be evaluated on how dangerous it is to move.
And authorities say there are at least 2,000 sites throughout the United States, probably more, that fit the same description. They are all chemical time bombs.
You don't pick up the paper any time. I mean, every day you see something pertaining to some nasty pollution.
The fact that 10 million other wells may be polluted in the United States doesn't make me feel any better about our well having been polluted. It really doesn't change anything as far as these kids and this family is concerned.
My legs, my teeth, bones especially, I had 4 separate stress fractures during school and running while I was running.
When we started thinking about the water, that Joan had been drinking this water with this carcinogen in it when she was carrying him, we said, well, you know, maybe that's the reason.
He was born in January of '78 and was diagnosed 13 months later with leukemia.
I mean, they didn't even make an attempt to let people know that this kind of stuff was even stored there and that it had seeped into the water supply. You're so frustrated, there's nothing you can do.
Children are going to die someday in this area because bureaucrats and politicians didn't move quickly enough.
Liberty, justice for all.
Anyone from the public wish to speak? Mr. Kelly.
We can go back to 1956 and I could bring you up to date with travesties that have occurred in South Brunswick Township that have permitted these sorts of conditions to exist today. This is not conjecture on my part. These are not things I have imagined for the past 5 years. These are things I have seen and experienced and suffered from. So don't tell me that there's no one in government, whether on a local or a national level, who is not kowtowing to industrial interests.
Some of us are not responsible for, and I'm sure mistakes were made in the past, and you know that we have spent an awful lot of money correcting mistakes that we recognized and that we identified for the last couple of years.
When I went down to testify in Washington, a friend of mine said, why bother? They know everything you're going to tell them anyway. And I said, well, at least this way they'll know what happens to a private American citizen when he runs into a problem like this. The absolute helplessness that the private citizen is subjected to.
Well, we were using and buying spring water, and then the price got so high out in the local supermarkets where we live that, you know, you just... And in the summertime, it's very difficult to keep these gallon jugs.
Yeah, now the price of spring water might be high, but the price of cancer surgery is a hell of a lot higher.
But that's why some of my fish died. They get these burns on their body, and they've been dying on me. Having a problem keeping
And you're drinking this stuff?
Wow. Well, I drink as little water as